sung that song in a long time.
Old school.
Yeah. Is that why you're looking for the blue hymnal?
No, it's actually the next song.
Oh, okay. So while I'm dating myself, I've got to turn it on first. That's dating myself too. I remember as a kid watching Muhammad Ali on TV. And of course, Muhammad Ali, boy, he filled up the news. He was bigger than life. And this was a fight with Joe Frazier. And Ali had the rope-a-dope. And I remember as a kid watching this and thinking, what kind of a strategy is this? He's against the rope and Frazier just keeps hitting him and hitting him and hitting him and hitting him. That doesn't sound like a good strategy. You want to hit and not be hit. In fact, I think it was I don't remember if it was Muhammad Ali's daughter, but basically someone saying, if you want to start boxing, everybody's all up to, the hitting part, but it's the being hit that's really bad. And so Muhammad Ali, he would do the rope-a-dope, and Frazier would just pound and pound and pound and pound. And then, of course, later in the fight, Ali comes out there and knocks him out. And you think, well, what's with that rope-a-dope? Now, everyone will tell you that this world is painful. And you can sit and listen to the prayer requests, and it might be a dog, it might be a marriage, it might be a death. And we wonder, well, why? And for centuries, people have said, well, surely a good God can't be accounted for this world. And this becomes the problem of evil or the problem of pain. Now let's run a couple of thought experiments here. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Jesus is God, and limitations of Jesus' knowledge and in the incarnation are always a big debate. But if Jesus wanted to help a lot of people in the first century, why not teach them germ theory? Because in fact, when I was a missionary in the Dominican Republic, a lot of church groups would come down and they're going to teach sanitation and germ theory, and they would sit with the Dominicans and the Haitians who had lots of ideas about the evil eye and not letting your kid out when it rains. And these missionaries would come down and say, the world is full of tiny little things that you can't see. And those are the things that are making you sick. And the Dominicans and the Haitians would listen to them and say, tiny little things I can't see. They're all over my hands, and I should wash my hands and not let the pig in the house or the chickens, and And they say, yes, you have to believe in these tiny little things you can't see. Right. And that's the way it would go. But if Jesus would teach germ theory, if Jesus had given them penicillin, then instead of just going around healing people one by one, well then lots more people could be healthy like we are. In fact, if you look at, they're having these discussions in LA because with the rise of homelessness, you have feces on the street and poor sanitation. They're even contemplating that, certain diseases which are almost unknown in our world because of sanitation could come up in LA just because of the homeless crisis. And so, why not Jesus just teach them about germs or give them penicillin? Surely, teach a man to fish, that's one thing. But give a man a fish is one thing. Teach him to fish. Teach the ancients to fish, and surely the world would be better if that's what you're about, Jesus. And then the problem of Paul, not this Paul, but Saul of Tarshish. I've made this point a number of times, and because if you think about this, Paul, a little bit younger than Jesus, lived about the same time, and surely Paul was making regular trips to Jerusalem, and surely he would have heard about Jesus, but he never met him, at least to the best of our knowledge. And then Paul, of course, being a Pharisee, being someone who was highly educated, being zealous for the Lord, when he saw this heresy break out, and people like Stephen, the deacon, preaching about Jesus' resurrection, Paul was going to stamp it out. And so when they're stoning Stephen, Paul is holding the cloaks. And then Paul goes on a rampage and arresting for, we assume, for capital punishment, stoning for people who are followers of Jesus. And so there are families who lost loved ones because of the persecution that Paul led. But then, of course, on the road to Damascus, Jesus appears to Paul and his life does a 180. And he goes in a different direction. Now, think about this. What if the story of Stephen that you can find in the book of Acts, the heavens opens and Stephen sees glory and talks? Why not, while you're at it, Jesus, look at the guy holding the coats and say, convert him right there. All of those families that had suffered under the persecution of Saul of Tarshish, that could have been avoided if Jesus had just changed the timeline a little bit. But he didn't. There's a movie there's a guy who got his PhD at Calvin Seminary, joined the Orthodox Church eventually, has a very interesting life, did a movie about his own personal conversion later on. But one of the things that he did in his movie, he had a whole bunch of young people. And one of the people said, you know, we had an uncle in our family who was dearly loved. And he went to bed one night smoking a cigarette. And he fell asleep in the bed, and of course the cigarette fell out of his mouth and got into the mattress, and the mattress caught on fire. He was killed in the fire. How hard would it be for God to reach down and put the cigarette in the ashtray? And she said, I don't know if I can believe in a God, or believe there is a God, if he would let my uncle die in such a senseless way. These things are real. And people wrestle with them. And each of us, we begin to realize when calamities strike in our lives. You know, just out east, visiting my family, and, my brother-in-law is quiet now because he misses his wife. And his kids are a little lost because their mom isn't there. And I wake up on the 7th and my mother's crying already because she's thinking about her daughter. And, my sister was such a vibrant person. She was at the center of this Christian school. And when she died, it just left a hole. And so you say, Lord, why take her? These questions haunt us. This is kind of a famous picture in our family of, there's Betty, he's just having fun, but of course Maddie and Josie are 2 years apart. And 2 years now, Josie just turned 21. Difference between 21 and 23, well, that's not real far. But when one is 6 and the other is 4 and they're trying to play a computer game, and every time Maddie gets on the computer, it's just click, 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 everything's fine. And Josie gets on the computer game and, I can't do it. I can't do it. And as a little kid, she gets so frustrated. And I just love this picture because it says it all. And Maddie's just kind of watching thinking, well, it wasn't so hard. But there's Mom. And what's she doing? Is she going to say, oh no, Josie, I can click it? Because Mom can click it. Mom can probably play the computer game better than Maddie. She's an adult. Click, 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 click. There it's done. Why does she let? I mean, look at her face. She gets so angry, so frustrated. And there sits Mom. Just sitting there. It feels like impotence. But Mom is thinking process. They came to Bethsaida. Some people brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. Now, Bethsaida, pretty soon we'll be talking about Bethlehem. Bethlehem, Beth in Hebrew is house, and Lechem in Hebrew is bread. Here, Beth is house, and Seda is fish. This is the house of fish. This is the fishermen. This is the fisherman's place. This is where a bunch of the disciples are from. Now here in the Gospel of Matthew, Bethsaida gets noted because Jesus says, "Woe to you, Chorazin, woe to you, Bethsaida, for if the deeds done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes." He talks about Tyre and Sidon and compares Capernaum with Sodom. And Jesus is basically saying, I go into your world and I do these miracles in front of you, and you still don't believe. And that's a funny thing about us, because what's really funny is that the problem of pain grips people most strongly, it seems, in the wealthiest, most comfortable, most secure places in the world. And you go into, let's say, the shacks of cane cutters and coffee pickers in the Dominican Republic, who have far less security, far less creature comfort, far less ability to imagine living a long life, and they have faith, and we wrestle. And so Jesus says, Bethsaida, I've been in your streets, healing the sick, having the blind see and the lame to walk. I've been doing all of this in your city, and you know what you want? You want more tricks. And so what happened is, here's a blind man. Jesus is back. Let's get the blind man and let's get Jesus. Jesus, do another miracle. We saw one last week. We saw one the week before. Do it again. We want to see it again. This is what Bethsaida has become. So then Jesus takes the blind man by the hand and gets him out of town. Because he says, I'm going to heal him. But it's not going to be up in front of show in the town for everyone to watch. And then it's more like, if you remember a few weeks ago, when Jesus healed the deaf man, he put spittle on his fingers and put it in his ears. This time he spits in his eye. Now the cultures are different, I come to Jesus, I need to see, and he spits in my eye. But he spits in his eye, and he lays hands on him, and he asks the man, can you see anything? Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Greek today, because the regular word, the Greeks have lots. Remember how you've heard that the Eskimos have lots of words for snow? The Greeks have lots of words for see. And so Jesus says, can you see anything? Now, and the man responds, well, and this is what the text says. And the man anablepo and said, I can blepo people, but they look like trees walking. Now this is really weird. Now, a number of years ago in the 70s, there's a big rage over the phrase born again, because it comes out of the King James Version in the Gospel of John in chapter 3. We've been in chapter 3 for a number of weeks in our adult Sunday school class. And you find in many contemporary translations, born from above. And that bothers people. Why did it say born again, and now it says born from above? The reason is because of this little prefix here, ana, which means both again and from above. The word is ambiguous. It can mean either one. And so what you'll find in this passage is that the man either recovered his sight or looked up. You can't tell from the Greek. And then you have to ask, well, why did the author use this word here? Well, I don't know. What's happening in this passage? Did the man look up? And when you look at anablepo and you look at all the stories that we've looked at recently, for example, when Jesus was with the 5,000, he took bread and he looked up. What's with the looking up? And what's really weird is that in almost every other miracle Jesus does, it takes, and it's done. One and done. And with this one, Jesus puts spit in his eye and lays hands on him, And he looks up and he says, I see men walking like trees. Now, this goes in some interesting areas that I'm not going to get into because I really haven't quite figured it out to my own satisfaction. But what I want to teach you a little bit today is how Greek prepositions work. And you thought, I didn't go to church today to learn about Greek prepositions. But Greek prepositions work spatially. And so you have all of these different prepositions, and some of ice means into, en means in, dia means through, ana means from above or again. There it is right there. And you have accusative, dative, genitive, all this stuff that you learn when you go to school. But the Greeks not only have all these words for seeing, but they have all these prepositions that are very spatial. And what happens in this passage today is that they're all kind of in there. Another little thing about Greek that I often tell the adult Sunday school class, this is an ancient papyrus, which is, I think, from the 2nd or 3rd century. It's one of the earliest copies of the New Testament that we have. And if you look at this, you might recognize something that in some ways it looks like this. Does anybody know what this says? You can read it, kind of, can't you? You realize I just took out of the spaces and the punctuation, and then I, didn't stop words. See, all of that is technology that happened far later, especially after the printing press. In the ancient world, they just went one letter after another. No spaces between words, no capitalization, no punctuation. The word doesn't end at the end of the line. They didn't think in terms of words. When they were writing, well, if you ever sit down and if you're listening to me talking, you made a transcript, you'd realize that it's sort of a mess. My sentences don't finish, and it's all over the place, and there's ums and uhs and all of that. Well, there it is. And so then when we get to this text, we find blepo, seeing, anablepo, to regain sight or to look up. En-blepo, to look into. Remember, en. Peri-blepo, to look around. Dia-blepo, to look through. Epi-blepo, to look above. Ana-blepo, same thing that we had before. And on and on and on, because the prepositions and the verbs all run together. And then when we look at this passage, then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and dia-blepo, and his sight was restored. Another preposition, apo. And he saw, en-blepo, everything clearly. Now, if you read this in English, you can't notice this because it's see, look, and they try to render it. But basically, there's a progression with the forms of the word to see. And first he looks up, and then he looks through, and then he sees in. And you wonder, well, why is this happening here? Well, many people in pondering this passage have noted that there are some certain constructions that suggest that this passage is about the blindness of the disciples. That no matter how many miracles Jesus does in front of them, they just don't get it. Jesus rescued, and I got in trouble and I prayed to God and everything worked out okay. You'd think that would mean that we now have faith, and when trouble arises again, we would say, well, God rescued me before, I'm not going to get anxious. But no, we do. And so Jerome, who was an ancient preacher, actually translated the Bible into Latin for the first time. We have copies of ancient sermons, and one of the things that he noticed is that Bethsaida is the house of the disciples. And even in the house of the disciples, they don't get Jesus. They can't see. And 2 weeks ago when I preached last, we talked about the yeast of the Pharisees and the Herod. And Jesus says, you have eyes to see but can't see. And ears but can't hear. And there was the spittle with the dumb. And then there was the emphasis on Isaiah 35 that I brought through in that sermon. And the next passage is Peter's blindness to Jesus' sight. So that's clearly a part of this passage. But everybody notes in this miracle, this two-stage miracle, why does Jesus seem to only do the job halfway and then have it to finish? Now, ancient commentators looked at that and saw process. Contemporary commentators look at that and see obstacle or difficulty. I think part of what this passage is saying is this heart of Christianity which says this. We like to imagine that faith in God is a tool to resolve all of our different situations. The perspective of the Bible was much more, faith in God is a reality that allows us to suffer faithfully. See, we want to avoid suffering, and nothing in the New Testament suggests that your faith gives you a pass on calamity in your life. Christians die just like non-Christians. Christians sin as non-Christians do. Christian marriages break up. Non-Christian marriages break up. Being a Christian doesn't mean you'll avoid suffering. What then is its value? Well, it offers hope that your suffering is not in vain. The story ends that he sent him away to his home saying, do not even go into the village. And what this suggests is that the blind man used to see and then lost his sight. And when he lost his sight, he lost his livelihood. All of this calamity in his life. And he didn't live in Bethsaida, but Bethsaida was the largest town nearby. And so every day he probably got up and had someone led him to the marketplace. And there he sat in the marketplace begging, because that was all that was left to him. And Jesus basically says, now don't go into the village again. Go back. Earn your living. Your life is restored. I've done this for you. But your life is restored. That's what I'm doing. The blind man was a beggar who came into the village to beg, and Jesus turns him away from that life and sends him back home. But this is still this world. And of course, it's kind of cute when it's Josie playing a computer game. But it's not cute when it's all the suffering that we know about and endure. Why did I start talking about that rope-a-dope at the beginning of the sermon? What is Jesus doing on the cross? This world makes Jesus the enemy and puts him on that cross and says, we're angry, we're hurt, we're afraid, and we think you ought to go. So they hang him naked on a cross, and they mock him, and they enjoy his pain, and they say, you saved other people, come down from the cross, show us a miracle. And Jesus says, I'm going to play rope-a-dope here, and you're going to hit me, and you're going to hit, and hit, and hit, and hit, and hit, and nobody's going to know what I'm going to do. But what does he do? He takes our abuse. He takes our punishment. And what does he do on Easter? He rises. And he's not like Muhammad Ali. He doesn't get George Foreman on the ground or Frazier and, put it in his face. What he does is he says, you can point and accuse and beat and wonder and be anxious all you want. I'll take it all. I'll take it all. But you can't stop me from loving you, from saving you, from teaching you something about life. Here's the picture. God, like a parent, works with us through the pain. Talk to almost any great saint. What will they tell you? A saint's life doesn't look like this. They were born, they had the right ideas, everything went great, and then they rode a chariot up to heaven. Even Elijah's life didn't look like that. He got the chariot ride. Saints' lives look like they suffered. They were beaten. They lost. But they endured. And because of those sufferings, Philippians 2, the world was changed. That's what a saint's life looks like. But when you're just a kid, you learn to suffer. Now, Maddie, too, they both, homeschooling the kids was fun because they're smart girls. They learn fast. So when you're a homeschooler, what do? Keep giving them easy problems? No, you give them a hard problem. Why? Because they got to learn to fail. They got to learn to struggle. They got to learn to be strong. So Jesus takes our abuse, gets up into the rope and says, go ahead. Go ahead. I know what it is to hurt. So let's go back to the progression of these strange Greek verbs. Because in the passage, if you line them up, they kind of make a picture. They kind of make a picture of the Christian life. It's look up. It's look again. Are you struggling? Yeah, look up. He knows you're hurting. He knows what you're going through. Look again. And as this trial goes, you begin to look through, and you begin to see in, and you begin to remember. As I said in the prayer, this world is not a stable place. C.S. Lewis notes that every love affair in this world ends in one or two ways: death or betrayal. Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but be of good cheer. That's the old English way of saying, have heart, have strength, have courage. In this world you will have trouble, but I played rope-a-dope, and I have overcome the world. Believe in me and follow me. Let's pray. Lord, I would so love to be able to resolve all of the troubles, not just only of the prayer requests that came today, the anxiety of coworkers, the pain of cousins because of a parent's divorce, the loss of a pet, the illness of a friend. And Lord, with your miracles, you gave witness to the life of the age to come, but you didn't hand out penicillin, and you didn't teach them about sanitation or about germs. And you kept your timing with the Apostle Paul's conversion for reasons we can't understand. But Lord, we trust and believe that even when you don't reach down and rescue, just like Jesus didn't use any of that power that he displayed in making the blind man see in his hour of utmost need on the cross, so too we can believe and trust that in the midst of our trials, you are with us and you will make all things new. Help us to trust. Help us to look up. Help us to see through. And help us to see in to the work that you're doing in this world. Amen. Would you stand?
This last song is a classic example of how songs have morphed throughout the years.